would be fine. Nancy Anderson, who is the director and attorney, associate director and attorney for ADAP, is going to introduce our next guest speaker. All right, you good?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very pleased to introduce our next speaker, Senior Corporal Herb Cotner. In your program brochure, you'll find a complete biography of him. I'm going to try and point out something that isn't written in there. I don't know if I'm making you a little bit nervous.
I guess I am.
All right. That was my intent. This morning when Sam Cochran was introduced, he was described as the man when it comes to CIT. In 2013, the Dallas Morning News described Mr. Cotner as a rock star to persons who care about people with mental illness. The occasion of him being dubbed rock star was, and we're coming full circle here, Mr. Cotner being awarded the 2013 Sam Cochran Criminal Justice Award by NAMI. So we heard from the man, and now we're going to hear from a rock star. Please join me in welcoming Senior Corporal Herb Cotner.
Well, Wanda, I'm not sure. My thing didn't come up off of this, and I think I did it right, so we'll find out. Good. This is going to be like torture for me because I don't know how to stand still. So I have to stand behind a podium, so it'll be really hard. And I'm going to do something different. I am the vice president of NAMI Dallas, and I've been in NAMI for a long time. My family has mental illness, and I also suffer from mental illness. And I'm going to present something differently to everybody in this audience because I'm a 29-year veteran police officer, and usually you don't hear them saying they suffer from mental illness. So I want to put this out there. I met Mark. I'm not sure where Mark is right now, but I met Mark, and he's a person that's at 1 in 5. He suffers from serious, persistent mental illness. I'm that other 4 out of 5 people. The perfect example of this is I lost my wife 15 months ago, and I've been suffering. Excuse me. I also lost my dad about 8 days ago. So here, I have all these things that are triggers towards depression. And my wife fought a long, very hard battle with cancer. I can't believe how strong she was. And she did that for over 22 years, or right at 22 years. So as this time frame came about, the last 2 years of her life, I suffered from severe depression. And these were triggering events. And I'm in that other 4/5. And the reason why I'm telling you I'm the other 4/5, but I do suffer from mental illness is I still got up and went to work. I maxed out on vacation time. I still have over 1,200 hours of sick time. I have comp time on the books. I do all this stuff, yet, you know, when the alarm would get off, I would go like, I don't want to, I don't want to, I don't want to, and I went to work. So I want to let people know out here, you can be like me, you can come forward, you can be this. I think that in my reference to being the police officer in the city of Dallas that does all this training and provides the training for the individuals, that my recognition, my willingness to let people know that I too suffer from mental illnesses. I'm on the autism spectrum. I have anxiety disorder. The anxiety disorder has been passed down to through my family. In fact, my mother died young because of her anxiety disorders and all the drugs that she took or medications she took over the years. So she's typical of a person that fits in the 1 in 5 category. We all vary, but we're all here. And I try to break down those barriers and that stigma to let everyone know that it is all of us. And you're going to be dealing with my family members when you deal with that. So I want to do that. And then I want to thank Commissioner Perdue. I want to take him back to Texas because I've loved the attitude that he and his staff has had since I've gotten here. Mr. Walsh, you're doing a great job. Ms. Laird, wonderful. I've met so many wonderful people here. It's been good. I see that I've got a general screen, but I guess that is not mine, I don't think. So, let me go through this real quick. I already told you I've been a police officer. I'm 2 months shy of 30 years. I've been in NAMI Dallas for 8 years. I'm a family-to-family teacher. Anybody in here know what family-to-family is? If you're in NAMI, you know what family-to-family is. Law enforcement officers, if you don't know what family-to-family is, you need to find out what family-to-family is. The citizens out there don't know what to do, so they call 911. Family to family is a solution to that problem. It provides education. It does a great job. Perfect. Thank you. And mentioned, she also mentioned this other program. I know NAMI Dallas is very active with Ending the Silence, which is a program that's coming out that we're trying to get proven to be fact-based, to go out there and go to the school systems where you teach kids about how to recognize mental illness and getting kids not to be stigmatized but be directed to proper care and treatment, which would be absolutely wonderful. But this is who I am here. And I've been doing this for 10 plus years, and the real reason that I do it is that, but then I come back here and why am I here? I'm a police officer. I got hired on to put bad guys in jail, and I worked in South Dallas back when cocaine run the roost, and back when we had 500 murders in that area, and I was police. And today, I'm actually the behavioral health liaison for the department, and I work on all those projects. But the reason why I am so dear to this program, why crisis intervention training and that part of it is important to me is this. In 1988, there was a young man that I was able to meet. I was one of the first people the officers I worked with introduced me. His name was John Chase. He was a fellow officer, been on the department for just about a year before me. He was in downtown Dallas. It was a Saturday morning. He stopped a gentleman, or stopped, I think it was actually a lady, to write her a traffic ticket. While he's writing her the traffic ticket, a man comes up and starts banging on the window of a squad car. In 1988, you weren't the real police if you didn't get out there and address something like that by yourself. So he got out, he addressed it by himself. The individual was a schizophrenic individual. I know that simply being schizophrenic does not make you dangerous. And if you all aren't aware of that, come over and see me. I've been to a lot of studies. Being mentally ill does not make you dangerous. He not only was schizophrenic, he was also actively psychotic. And now we started having problems. And he acted out, and he had people out there saying stuff that drove him on, and he ended up fighting the officer, and the officer didn't do what we do today. He was by himself. And he did what he thought he was supposed to do in those days, and he lost the battle. And that hurts. We don't need to have officers that we can train and give better training to that will prevent their loss of life when we take old, outdated procedures and we're using those. And that's important to me about why we choose to train our officers these, so we don't have those traumatic outcomes earlier. Mr. Walsh talked about them. I agree with what Mr. Walsh said. There is no good outcome when there is injury or loss of life, regardless if it's the officer or if it's the individual we're dealing with that loses it. Everyone's affected. People think the police officers go home and they're not affected, and that's just not correct. We're all deeply affected, and we need to work on this. And law enforcement, we trained 99% of our time, our training, for 1% of those times, those instances we get into. I did 19 years on the street and never discharged my weapon. I fit in the category where I got all that training, yet I never actually had to discharge my weapon. That training probably protected me from discharging that weapon, but we do all that training, and we call it defensive tactics training. Other agencies call it throughout the world, we call it. And if you go back and look at all the literature, we were stuck in this training. All we knew how to do was to give someone a loud verbal command, and if they didn't follow it, we repeated it. And if that didn't work, we escalated the verbal command, and then we went hands-on. So I ask all of you here in the room right now, I want you to go home tonight to your significant other, and I want you to give them a nice verbal command. And when they don't follow it, because it's something like, "Why have you not made me dinner?" And then you repeat it, and you get the second angry look. And then Mr. Walsh also brought back a memory. I talked to all the young servicemen that come back, and his description about the guy throwing the grenade. For a soldier, and for law enforcement, for you people that aren't law enforcement, that is an aggressive act. We're thinking about taking the action just like he described. And I don't know how many cops, but I bet every cop's got a story like Mr. Walsh's. I know I do. Where I'm so glad I made the right decision, which wasn't to use force, and I actually exposed myself to that danger. And that's why it's such a vivid memory. And we have to always keep these things in mind about how dramatic these things and how changed, and I want to work on it, so we do it because he was taught in Vietnam to take out the threat. Well, when I go back home to my spouse, significant other for me now, it's my kids, and I give them those nice verbal commands, if they don't follow it, I can't take them out. Does everyone see how this conflict now rises up and goes? Because my mechanism doesn't work. And law enforcement, that's what we trained the officer to do. He didn't have this other skill set to come back and work it. And that's what crisis intervention training became. And by the way, I'm 100% with Sam, and if you don't get the end of this message about how important the partnership is, I can't explain it to you. When Mr. Walsh, Mr. Laird first saw me do this presentation that I'm basing this off of, I don't do it alone. I do it with my representative or the people I work with from the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And they do half the presentation, and I do half the presentation. Because as Sam said, it's got to be that mutual ownership of that program. So what we're going to do is we're going to work out so that we're trying to get from just training that 1% into having that into a legitimate number. I believe in defensive tactics. So all you law enforcement officers, by the way, I noticed how you guys got here early, took over the back of the theater. But I thought that really good because I didn't bring my pistol from Texas, so I got the doors covered and I feel pretty safe. I don't know what the number is, but we've got to change it to where you spend more time de-escalation training because the officer has to know what he needs to do after he gets in control of this. And more importantly, this number here represents something else to me. I can go back to all these law enforcement officers back here, and I'm telling you, I'm actually truly amazed that we have as good outcomes as we do. And if I'll try and talk about this a little bit more here in a second. But we face people that their family members aren't able to handle control, and we're supposed to go in and resolve that thing peacefully. Y'all get that message? We're set up for failure, and yet we do it greater than 99% of the time correctly, even with the training that a lot of agencies have currently. And when I train to get that 1% to come down to be 1/1000th of a percent. That's where my training is. I want to get those officers down there because I know my job profession shortens my lifespan, and I know it's because of all the stressors I face and my fellow officers face. So if I can train them and I can reduce those stressors, I'm extending their life and I'm extending the livelihood of their families. So those are the reasons why I provide this training, why I go forward. And one of the big things that we add into this, and we talk about this now for you guys back there, is time, distance, and cover. Has anybody in here ever heard